Thank you. So once again, welcome to the training webinar on project basics. Just a few things here for housekeeping. If you do have any questions at any point during this training, I would ask that what you would do is to text those, use the chat feature, and send those questions over that way. And at the appropriate time, we'll be able to incorporate that into the training. That way it just keeps everything simple. So I do appreciate your time. So what we're going to do here is start with Terrain Navigator Pro. Let me go ahead and share out my Terrain Navigator Pro screen. And when you open Terrain Navigator Pro, one of the major differences with version 11, which took a little bit of getting used to, was the idea that Terrain Navigator Pro opens up to the, a satellite photo over your region. And that was so that we could accommodate other than just the traditional USGS topo maps. Just that's our opening screen. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about two different ways that you can access your Terrain Navigator Pro projects. Some of you are new to Terrain Navigator Pro, some of you have been using it for several years. But there's two different ways to access the projects. And let me show you two different ways. So under the File menu, you can choose Manage Projects. And that will bring up a list of the available projects. It will give you the project properties on the right-hand side of that window. So, for example, on each of these, it will give you the name. If there was a starting location, you would see that. So project properties are on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side are the available projects. I'm going to go ahead and close this window and show you another way to access the same window, and that's under the Layers menu and choosing Manage Projects. And once again, you'll see it's exactly the same thing that's under the File menu. Some of the customers were, used to using, under the File menu, so that's why it's included in both places. So let's go ahead and talk here about the different buttons and what they do. So let's say, for example, I wanted to activate this first map. I could choose the Activate button, and what you'll see is it will activate that particular project. One of the things that you could also do is double click on a map, and that's going to bring up the project, and it's also it's going to bring you to the it's going to close the window, and it's going to bring up that project. So let me go ahead and go back to Manage Projects. You can copy maps here. You can create your new projects. And you can delete old projects. So on the right-hand side, the project properties, you'll have the name. You can make some notes. You can set a starting location for your project. We've often been asked, what if I want to, start it always at this particular map or this particular location? You can set a starting location here. There's a button here to enable project synchronization. That's a very detailed training, and that will be in November. So I'm not going to go over that. That will be for a later time. There's a button here to embed GeoPin media. GeoPins can be as simple as a Word document. It can be a picture. It can be a video. And what it is in Terrain Navigator Pro, a GeoPin you can create that at that location, and then right-click on the GeoPin. Embedding GeoPin media means that it will be saved to your local hard drive. And then the final button here is Lock Project from Editing. One of the things that I would like to point out with this particular button is that locking the project, when you select this, it's for the local for your local installation on your computer. If you do have 2 or more users in Terrain Navigator Pro and you've set up a team and you're sharing projects, this does not apply to multiple users. Again, I just want to reiterate that. Locking the project from editing is for the local computer, and you will no longer be able to add any markers, routes, or tracks, but that's for the local hard drive. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about projects. When you do not think about setting up projects ahead of time, Terrain Navigator Pro goes with the default. So up here you'll see default. If you don't choose a project, if you're not intentional in creating a new project, all the work that you do, all the markers, routes, tracks, land in your default. And what happens is over time, you've got quite a collection of data, and then it becomes unwieldy. So what we like to do is to stress and to emphasize the idea of using projects. Now, you say, well, how do I know when to create a new project? One of the things that we highly recommend is that you analyze your workflows. So for example, let's say you're a forester or you're a surveyor. You might want to have a new project for every customer or every client. That way it keeps that customer's information strictly in a new project. So that would be one way of analyzing your workflows. Another way, thing that you would like to do is go ahead and, let's say if you're in search and rescue, you might have a new project for every new search or every new training that you go on. That might be a possibility. If you're working, in other areas or other vertical markets, you do want to think about how that makes sense. Now it looks like I have a question here from Bob. What's in the drop down for the starting location map name? No, we're going to get to that, Bob, when I create a new project, and I'm going to go over that. So bear with me for just a few minutes here. I'll get to that very, very shortly. As far as starting location, once again, don't be afraid to go ahead and text over your questions that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close out of this, and we're going to talk about we've talked about projects. Now, one of the things in Terrain Navigator Pro, a project will consist of layers. And layers in Terrain Navigator Pro can be a collection of markers, routes, tracks, polygons. So any of these layers, and each of those layers are separate. So you'll have a marker layer, you'll have a track layer, you'll have a route layer. Those are what make up a project. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to close out of this, and let's say we want to start from scratch and create a new project. So I'm going to go over to my file menu, and I'm going to choose Manage Projects. And what I'm going to do is click on the New button. And for the purposes of today's training, I'm going to keep the new project exclusively on the PC. Again, the second option there for synchronization, we'll cover that in November. So for today, we're going to keep it exclusively on the PC. And we're going to give this one a name. I'd like to, we're going to go to the White Mountain. So I'm going to call this White Mountain Training Training Project. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And what you'll see is in the upper left-hand corner, White Mountain Training Project. If I wanted to rename that, if I made a mistake, or if I wanted to call it something else, we could do that. And put some notes here. This is for today's training. And starting location. One of the things that you would want to do here is set that start location. So you can say, okay, every time this project opens, it doesn't open to a particular location. So that would be none. Last location would be the last location that was shown on the map. Current location would be the current location. And then I have some other ones here from before. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the current location. Again, project synchronization, we're going to defer until November, and we've already gone over embedding the GeoPin media. We can make that local. I am not going to lock the project from editing because we haven't even set up anything in there yet. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. One of the areas that I did want to do is also talk about finding objects or finding things on a map. So for example, under the Find menu, I do have a bookmark that I have already set up. So as you can see, there's many different ways to find things on maps, you know, by location, by zip code, by coordinates. If you have those, let's say those are called into you and you have to quickly bring up a map. If you're working in an emergency response type of situation, you can do that. But for today's training, we're going to go to bookmark. I've got a bookmark that I've already set up, which is for the White Mountain National Forest. I'm going to go ahead and replace my active map. And what you'll see here is a satellite photo. It has been a couple of things up here. I just want to take a minute while we have this. Under the image is going to tell you whatever's checked is the type of map that you're looking at. And what we're looking at is a satellite image. And under topo, I've merged it with a USGS topographic map, and it makes a very high resolution map. It's one of my favorites. It does show, you know, a lot of detail. You can see the contour lines, and then you can see, you know, parts of the satellite photo underneath. So I think it's a kind of a nice looking map. So for the sake of the purposes here, I'm going to go back to my managed projects. I'm going to go back to my White Mountain training project. Whoops. Let me go ahead and do that again. Sorry about that. We're going to go here. We're going to, if I double click on it, it's going to bring up that project. Give me 1 second here. And what I want to do is activate that. And give me 1 second here. All right, so we're going to go and open that. Okay, well, I'll have to come back to that. I have a question for Ed on that, but in any event, here we are back at our White Mountain project here. And what we're going to do is go ahead and create some markers, some routes, and some tracks. And for the purposes of demonstrating how to split projects, for example. So I'm going to throw maybe about 6 markers down here, just for the sake of demonstration for anyone that might not be familiar with this. When I use the marker tool, which is what I created off, took it off the palette, it's the triangle with the dot in the middle. If I drop my marker, I can right click on it, I can edit that marker, and I can change a lot of things about it. You know, I can call this, let's say we know there's a cell tower there, for example. We can go ahead and put the name in, and we can change the color. You'll notice that that had changed. So I'm not going to move the point on that. The other thing I'm going to do is let's create a couple of routes here. So let's say there's a route that goes along this ridge here. And let's say it stops like right about here. So if I right click on this, I finish the track, then it's got a beginning and an ending. So let's put down a couple of those. Let's say there's another one, something like that. And let's go ahead and finish that one. and I'll throw one more down. All right, so that's going to finish that up. Again, you can right click, you can change the names, you can change the colors. And I'm going to also use the route tool here. And let's say there's a route that goes from here to here to here. It's dropping down waypoints. I'm going to finish my route, and let's just put one more. All right, so now I have a project, and I've got a collection of markers, routes, and tracks. Let's say, for example, I want to take some of this information and I want to start a new project. Maybe my project is getting too unwieldy. Maybe I just want to work with a set of the layers in a new project. So what I would do is go to the File menu. I would go to Manage Projects. And what I'm going to do is take my White Mountain training projects, I'm going to copy it, and it's going to be copy. I'm going to leave it like that. We could change the name to duplicate or whatever you'd like. And you'll see it shows up here in our list. And just going to ask a quick question for Ed here. Ed, I created this first project, but the starting location wasn't set properly. And so I did go to a bookmark.
Okay.
And what we did here was I have this. Can I edit the project now and change the starting location so it starts here?
Absolutely. If you go to the Layers menu and choose Manage Project, you can now set the starting location as the current location. So in other words, what's on the screen. Or you can select from any of the list of your existing bookmarks. So if you've created bookmarks like you have done here with the White Mountain National Forest, you can select that, and that will become the starting location for the active project. So in other words, whenever the project is activated, or when Terrain Navigator Pro starts up and it starts with that project, it will open the location that you specify here, either the current location, like I say, what's on the screen, or the bookmark that you've defined.
So I can go ahead and hit close here. That's going to save that.
Yes.
And then the question is I did run into a little bit of trouble here with managed projects with it not activating the project and closing the window. But it appears to be working now, so I'm not sure. I must have missed something there. So let me go back to our copy of our White Mountain training project. And let's go ahead and let's say we want to take some of these markers, and we're going to delete these, okay, so that we can demonstrate. And what I'm after is demonstrating how to copy layers to a new project. So what we're going to do is go to, let's see here. Give me 1 second. Let me go back to my hand tool just a second. All right, and I'm going to right here, let's go ahead, and I'm right clicking, and I want to delete that track, for example. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to right click on, let's say this marker. Oops. Right click on this marker, delete that. In fact, I'm going to delete all the markers except for the one that I've named, so I can demonstrate importing layers. So delete this marker, yes. We're going to go ahead and delete this one as well. So what I have left is the one that I called cell tower. We're going to leave that one. And let me go ahead and delete this track. And we're going to, all right. Now, you'll notice there's no save button in Terrain Navigator Pro. Terrain Navigator Pro automatically saves your information. One of the things that settings, if you want to adjust your settings on how Terrain Navigator Pro automatically backs up your files, you can go to the File menu, you can go to Preferences, and then you can go to Auto Save, Backup, and Restore. Now, Under preferences here, you can say, okay, I want to automatically save the active project every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, whatever you want. And you can say, okay, automatically back up my Terrain Navigator Pro projects to a specific location. So right now, the default is set to my documents / my terrain projects. But you can choose the browse button here and you can change the location if you want. And there's a button to back up all your projects. You can restore all projects from this preference. I'm going to close that for a second. And I want to show you one more thing under our Manage Projects window. You can delete your list of available projects. If your settings for autosave have been kicked in, what will happen is for each of these project names, there'll be a Terrain Navigator Pro archive. It's a .tpa file. That TPA file is handy when you want to restore your projects. And just to explain that in Terrain Navigator Pro, the desktop software is kept separate from your data files, and that's so that it's easy to restore files, for example. If you indeed have kept up with automatically archiving your files, you can delete, let's say I wanted to delete the California files here. It will ask me, and then it's going to say this action cannot be reversed. The thing to just point out here is that if you have the TPA file, then you can reverse it and you can restore that file. So not to worry that it says that the action cannot be reversed. Now, if, however, you have said, okay, I don't want automatically saving, or I don't want it, or backing up, then you're going to run into a problem, and then you're going to delete all your data. The reason for that is that your Terrain Navigator Pro considers your data sacred. It's very important that our customers not lose their work. So again, everything goes into the default project. And so you don't have to worry about deleting your information, especially if, let's say, you have 800 markers or 600 markers. It could be very unwieldy. So because of that, we've taken a lot of pains to make sure that your defaults are set to automatically back up, but you do have the choice if you don't want to. But you just want to think about that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say yeah to that, and that's going to be fine. I'm going to close this for now. I should have covered this in the beginning, just in case you're wondering what this red circle is. There is a, that's the center of the map on my screen. There's an X, the hand turns to an X, and that's how you remove that, just in case you're wondering about that. So let me go back, and I'm going to go to layers menu. I'm going to go to manage projects, and I'm going to show you how to copy layers now to this backup project, or this copy project. So we're going to go to White Mountain Training Project. I'm going to go ahead because I hadn't set my starting location, so I do need to go back to my bookmark. I will pull up my bookmark. I'm going to replace my active. And as Ed had mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, save it to, I want the starting location to be the current location. I'm going to hit close on that. Now, let's say we want to go ahead and bring these markers that have been not named into our new project. What we're going to do is go to the File menu. We're going to choose Export. And there's two ways to copy your layers to a new project. One of them is to copy to the clipboard. So let's export. Let's go to our markers, and you'll see a list of our markers. Well, our backup copy already has cell tower. So let's go ahead, and I can take my shift key here, and I can take all the markers that have numbers. So what I did is right click and I hit shift and I grabbed them all. And two things here. I can either save them, okay, and it's going to create a .mxf file. That's a marker file or a collection of markers. And you can give this a name, you know, White Mountain Test markers. You can go ahead and hit save. Now that would be handy if you're bringing markers perhaps into another program or whatever. So that's up to you if you want to go ahead and create a .mxf file. A second way, and an easier way to export your markers would be to copy to Clipboard. That's going to copy all your markers over to the clipboard, and then we're going to open our second project. And then what we'll do is paste the layer, paste those markers there. So I'm going to go ahead and click copy to clipboard. I'm going to go to my layers menu. I will manage my projects. I'm going to pull up the copy of the White Mountain Training Project, which you see is not here. And what we'll do here is we will go under the tools menu and we can say paste marker. And voila, you'll see that your markers have been pasted. I think this might be a good time to take an opportunity to go ahead and take any questions that we have so far. So if you want to just text those over, we can do that. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Just a quick review of what we've learned so far. We've learned about how to set a starting location for a new project. We've learned how to copy, you know, a set of layers and into a new project. So we've done quite a number of those things. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that it also applies not just for markers, but it also applies for other layers that are on your map. So under the file menu, if I go to export, some of the other things that you can export would be like range rings or range bearing lines if you have those, routes or tracks. I'm going to go ahead to just take a look at routes. You saw that we had 2 routes here. Again, we could do the same process, either save it and give it a name, or we can go ahead and copy to the clipboard. We can close, you know, the window. We can open our new project, and using tools, we can go ahead and we can paste, or we can, you know, also import. And that's going to work in the same way. Import markers. We can use the file format. We gave it a name, and it would import those as well. Let me just take a look here. So one of those things that we did was show how to split a project. Again, if things get unwieldy and you need to split a project or create a second project, then we talked about that. Almost done here. Another thing that I'd like to go ahead and just point out, under the help menu, if you go to contents, Ed has been very diligent in keeping our help up to date. So if you need a refresher on any of this, you can always go to, you know, the help. You can type, you know, organizing layers with projects, managing projects, and you'll see that he has all of that information that I've gone over in this handy help. So we do want you to take advantage of that. I have a question here from Bob, actually a couple of different questions. So let me go ahead and can something called Northwest Trails, if you're familiar with it, be imported as a layer? let me go ahead and ask Ed about that. Ed, are you familiar with Northwest Trails?
Well, to answer the question more generally, is that Terrain Navigator Pro will import any sort of geographic information, either as a track or a route or as an overlay, depending on what it is and what the format it's in. So for example, if this trail was in the GPX format, you could go to the File menu, choose Import, Tracks, and then choose the type of file that you have, including GPX. So that would be how you would bring a track, for example, a trail that was in the track format. Excuse me, a trail that's a track that was in the GPX format into Terrain Navigator Pro as a project, or into the active project more specifically. Another way, if you had, let's say, a KML or a KMZ file, or maybe even one of those Esri shape files, you would go to the File menu, choose Import Overlay, and then you'll see that shape files are available, as are KML, KMZ, and even AutoCAD DXF files can be brought in as overlays. Once they're in as an overlay, they can then be converted to routes or tracks for further editing within that particular project. So Terrain Navigator Pro is very flexible in that it will bring in a variety of formats. It doesn't care if it's a trail, a stream, a watershed, a series of windmills. It doesn't matter. Terrain Navigator Pro can bring it in as long as it's in a compatible format. And these are all very common formats for transferring geodetic data.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed, for that. Bob, I think that answers that question. If you do have a follow-up question, Bob, please feel free to send that. I have a second question here from Bob, and he says, is there a numerical limit to the number of available projects that can be saved? And again, that would be a question for our technical product manager.
So Terrain Navigator Pro does not have any particular limit as to the number of projects. There are, projects do become unwieldy if they are not, if they have too much stuff within the project. If you had a project that had lots and lots of tracks, let's say, that project can become unwieldy for Terrain Navigator Pro and cause it to perform poorly. So we definitely recommend using projects to split up your data, but you can use as many projects as you have as you want. There's no limit whatsoever.
Okay, so thank you for that, Ed. Bob, if you have any follow-up questions, you can go ahead and send those. Again, we're pretty much getting down to the end of our training webinar. So if you do have your questions, please go ahead and send those via text, and we can get those answered for you. Doesn't look like we have any other questions here. So again, thank you for joining us. This has been a TNP training webinar, the first of 3 on projects. And we've covered a number of topics this afternoon. And let's see, we will make this recording available. Those of you that have replied or RSVP'd, we'll go ahead and send that link to you as a refresher. It will be up on there's a Terrain Navigator Pro YouTube channel. So as soon as that's available, we will make that available to you. And let's see. Amy, thank you for your message. That is fantastic that you have, learned how to create and manage new projects. We're excited about that. Thank you for that. And Kenna, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Bill, you're welcome. We do appreciate that. Looking forward to our next look for the last Wednesday in October. And that next webinar is going to be on the Terrain Navigator Pro mobile app and team tracking. I have a question here. It's from Jack. And let's see. Jack says, is there a way to make the project's window larger? The project's window, there's not a button in the middle to make that larger, unfortunately. Is that correct, Ed?
That's correct.
So unfortunately, Jack, not at this time. Excellent. Daniel, thank you so much. Stephen, thank you, Stephen, for that comment. Love the software. Keep up the great work. We are trying hard to make, professional level, mapping software with useful features for our customers. So we appreciate the feedback. Thank you kindly. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. And thank you for joining us on today's webinar.